professionals looking to expand your practice with coaching, you are likely to encounter various employment opportunities throughout your career. Whether you're considering full-time positions, side hustles, or transitioning to independent contracting, understanding the financial implications of different employment classifications is crucial for making informed decisions that support both your career goals and financial well-being. Today's episode breaks down what every healthcare professional should know about W-2 and 1099 positions. Welcome to the Health Coach OT, evidence-based coaching tips and resources for managing chronic disease and rehabilitation. I'm your host, Dr. Jaclyn Schwartz, occupational therapist, scientist, board-certified health coach, and educator. This is where we expand the traditional boundaries of rehab to address the root causes of chronic disease, where we build the evidence-based skills to address lifestyle factors like nutrition, physical activity, and more. Using an inclusive and intuitive lens, we meet people where they're at in their health journey to create lasting outcomes. Before we begin, I want to emphasize that today's discussion is for educational purposes only. The information shared should not be considered individualized tax or financial advice. Everyone's situation is unique, and you should consult with your own tax professional before making financial decisions based on what you hear today. Today, I'm excited Matthew Shiebler, CPA, to the show. Matthew is the owner of Interactive Accountants and has been practicing accounting for over 25 years. His firm specializes in working with healthcare professionals, including occupational, physical, and speech therapists. Matthew has extensive experience helping therapy professionals navigate HIPAA-compliant bookkeeping, identifying valuable tax deductions, and making strategic financial decisions. His experience in both the business and regulatory aspects of taxes for therapists makes him an ideal guide for today's topic on employment classifications and their financial implications. Matthew, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Jaclyn.
So about this topic, when I was thinking about my time as a new grad, the good thing about occupational therapy and other therapies is often we're in demand, so we get to choose from multiple employment opportunities. And when I was a new grad, I had some positions that were W-2 and some positions that were 1099. And I didn't really understand what the difference was between them. All I knew was that the 1099 position paid more. And what I learned later is even though it paid more, it had some different tax implications. And so I know that there are a lot of new grad occupational therapy practitioners who are considering these different roles, or maybe people who have always been in a W-2 position who are looking for a new job and considering different roles. So I wanted to start by asking you if you could tell us a little bit about the fundamental differences between W-2 employment and 1099 independent contractor status.
Sure, happy to, Jaclyn. Let's start off first with a W-2 employee. When you are a W-2 employee, your employer is responsible for withholding taxes from your paycheck. So if you have a salary of $1,000 a week, your employer is going to withhold federal withholding taxes, Social Security, Medicare, and depending on where you're working, state withholding taxes, as well as potentially unemployment, disability. There's a lot of taxes that gets withheld, obviously. And then you take home your net pay after the employer withholds those taxes. The one thing that most employees don't realize is that your employer has to match the Social Security and Medicare that they withhold from your check. So if they're withholding $150 from your check, they're going to be giving Uncle Sam $300. Whereas if you are a 1099 contractor, there's no withholding. You are ultimately responsible for your federal withholding taxes, your self-employment taxes, as they're commonly called, which is Social Security and Medicare. You're responsible for your state income taxes. And the other major distinction there as a contractor is you're not eligible for unemployment normally. They made some exceptions during COVID, but generally speaking, you're not an employee, you're self-employed, and there's no unemployment. So those are just kind of two major differences when we're talking about W-2 versus 1099.
Some other benefits of being with a company is often like retirement and insurance. Do 1099 independent contractors get those benefits, or do they need to get them on their own?
Independent contractors need to get them on their own. And that could be a good thing or a bad thing. Sometimes as an independent contractor, you may want to participate in a plan that's more aggressive than what your employer offers, because usually that's going to be maybe a 401k plan with a small match or no match at all. Whereas being self-employed, if you wanted to participate in a SEP IRA or a solo K plan, there's a lot more opportunity there for you to take advantage of larger tax deductions related to retirement. Now, on the health insurance side and benefit side, that money's going to come out of your pocket, which is, as you mentioned earlier, there's usually a disparity between the pay rate of a contractor versus the pay rate of a W-2 employee. And I think that those disparities are there to help offset some of those costs you're going to have to recognize as an independent contractor.
Is there a way to figure out how much more the independent contractor has to be to cover all of these additional costs?
There really isn't such a, what we'll call like a standard format to do it. If you're just a solopreneur and you're considering W-2 versus 1099, you really have to weigh all the options. So how much is my health insurance going to cost me? How much am I going to be losing out on possible participation in a profit sharing plan the employer offers? Have I ever had a period of time where I needed to file unemployment, because work dried up or something, or, just any old reason really? And then I'm just trying to think what else there might be that you want to consider. It depends on how tax savvy, I guess, you are as well. When you are a 1099 contractor, you're not taxed on the 1099 you receive. You're taxed on your net business income that generally gets reported on Schedule C. And if you're a OT that's traveling a lot, going to different families' homes or different locations to perform services, maybe your employer isn't going to reimburse you for those miles. Well, if you're a 1099 employee, at least you have the opportunity to deduct that mileage. A few years ago, and I'm thinking it was probably like 3 or 4, W-2 employees used to be able to have unreimbursed employee expenses as a deduction on your return. Now, it was an itemized deduction, so not everybody was eligible for it, but for those that were, it was a game changer. That all went away a few years ago now, so you don't even get that. So you have to kind of look at things, from two different perspectives and kind of put together a balance sheet and say, okay, as a W-2 employee, I'm going to get free health insurance for myself. I'm going to get this 4% profit sharing potentially. If I ever get fired for whatever reason, at least I have the opportunity to collect unemployment. And maybe they have some other benefits too. Maybe there's some type of short-term disability, or, maybe there's some type of dependent care or some type of HSA that you can participate in. And look at all those things and say, okay, put a value to it, and let's say it's, $10 an hour. The other side of the coin, I'm a 1099 contractor. I'm going to be making $15 an hour more, let's say. Well, that more than offsets what I'm thinking my costs are going to be if I'm just a W-2. So now I've got maybe an extra $5 an hour in my pocket. I'm going to roll the dice. And, so long as I'm eligible to be a 1099 contractor, maybe that's the option I take. And I don't know if we're going to debate the IRS regulations of contractor versus W-2 today, but that's another story.
What I've seen, 1099 employees, they are often it's offered for home health, where you're seeing people like per visit. Oftentimes it's PRN, so that's as needed. So you're maybe filling in for other therapists and going on like a short-term assignment. Those are the biggest times I see people have 1099 as an opportunity. If it's a traditional OT job where you're going to the hospital every day or going to the school district every day, then you're more likely to be an employee. And that's how I see it shake out most of the time, but there, are exceptions to every rule.
There's definitely exceptions to every rule.
So it sounds like when considering a position, you would maybe have a spreadsheet, and on one side you would have like your pay plus, your healthcare benefits, any contributions to retirement, and then the taxes that they would pay on your behalf, and see what that tallies up to. And then you would look at your hourly rate and then account for things that you would have to buy yourself, like health insurance, contributions to your retirement that aren't matched, any other expenses that you might incur as a 1099 employee that might be otherwise covered by your employer. And so that would be different for each person and each position.
Yeah, exactly. And even some of those expenses that you have as a W-2 employee, like your cell phone. I mean, let's face it, every boss calls people on their cell, and some companies like mine, they'll have a BYOD policy and bring your own device and give you a reimbursement for it. And others just say, tough nuggies, we're going to call you when we need to call you. And that's that, So there's a lot of things that a 1099 contractor could deduct to help lower their tax bill that a W-2 employee just won't be eligible to do.
1099 person would have to do some additional things on top. So can you tell me about some of the additional things like bookkeeping or filing taxes that a 1099 employee might need to do?
Yeah, sure. Happy to. When you are a 1099 employee, generally speaking, you're going to file Form Schedule C with your personal tax return. And that's going to report your revenues and your expenses. And whatever the net of that is what you'll end up paying federal, the FICA taxes being Social Security and Medicare, and state income taxes on. So that's an extra form that goes along with your personal return. And I don't know about other preparers, but when we're preparing something like that, the fees are higher. It's more work, right? So you may have a little more professional fee involved. From a bookkeeping's perspective, you can keep it simple if you really want to. You could just say, my ends are my only income and my expenses I tracked on an Excel spreadsheet, right? And keep your receipts, obviously. Or if you kind of like to have things automated a little more, there's some software out there that can help.
OTs are fortunate in them they could have one job or they could have many jobs, whatever floats their boat. Can you have a W-2 position and a 1099 position at the same time?
Yeah, lots of people have side hustles, as I'll refer to them, right? Or the gig economy, whatever you want to call it. So long as the W-2 and the 1099 aren't coming from the same employer, you're okay usually. Lots of OTs can work 40 hours a week with a hospital and then put 20 hours a week in if they really want to with an agency, doing services, let's say after 3 p.m., right? And then they've got, their W-2 income with their health insurance and the benefits. And now this is just, money that they can either play with or set aside, whatever they want to do with it. Well, that's fine too then. You know what I mean? The only thing that you have to consider when you're doing something like that, Jaclyn, is if you're participating in a retirement plan with your employer, you're not going to be eligible for a retirement plan with that 1099 stuff.
So if you are an OT or PT or SLP and you are choosing between multiple job positions and you're offered a 1099 position, what would some good questions be to ask your employer?
Sure. I think if I'm going into something like that, I want to know, okay, where am I performing the services? Are you providing the supplies in these scenarios? What type of contract and what type of length of contract are you willing to provide me, right? Are you willing to provide me a 6-month contract or a 12-month contract? And you really want to have that contract in writing with the agency. A shake of the hand or, something verbal, for lack of a better word, isn't always the best case, And if you're really looking to formalize things for yourself as well, you may want to consider actually becoming a business yourself. You can become a single member LLC, which in my eyes helps things to look more legitimatized that you are an independent contractor versus the agency just cutting a check to Matthew Shiebler. Because then it could be like, if they come in there and do one of these employment audits, then things could look a little different. So those are a few of the things that I would say is to make sure it's in writing. You have your contract. You may want to form a legitimate business. That's usually not too expensive to do. And the last thing is, as a 1099 contractor that you need to make sure of with the employer, and this is nothing to do with accounting, is who covers the insurance? Does the agency or the location that you're working with, are they covering you? Or do you have to go out now and get your own malpractice insurance, right? Because then that's another expense. So those are just a few of the things that I would consider if I'm going into a job, or not a job, but a contract position as a 1099.
Are there any other red flags that you could think of?
I think if you're going into a situation where they're paying you as a 1099 person, but treating you like an employee, that's a red flag. If you're really a contractor, maybe they can tell you, what to do and where to do it, right? But they really shouldn't be telling you how to do your job, you know? They shouldn't be telling you things like, who, what, when, where, why you're doing this job, why, and how to do your job. That's why they contracted you. If I'm hiring somebody to, fix a toilet in my bathroom, I might tell them, hey, I need you to come on Friday if it's possible, and here's where I live. But I'm not going to tell, maybe I might even want to pick out the toilet, right? But I'm not going to tell them how to, solder the copper pipes or, how to put the little gasket or whatever it is that they put underneath the toilet. That's why I'm hiring a professional. So that would be a red flag. Generally speaking, also, one thing I suggest is before you get into a contract with someone is perhaps have the opportunity to speak with some of the other therapists that work there and get their, true opinion. Find out what it's like working with that clinic or with that agency from people that are engaged in a similar way that you're going to be. Do they pay on time? Do they issue their 1099s on time? Has there been, any types of investigations that have come on board from, Medicaid or insurance? Has there been any bad things that have happened? And really, do your due diligence on that agency or clinic before you just say, oh yeah, they're going to pay me $50 an hour. I'm in. Where do I, do your due diligence. Just like when you're going to take a job, you want to find out who you're going to be working for, because hopefully you're going to be working there for a long time, so long as everything goes good. So those would be some of my red flags.
Places potentially that have difficulty maintaining and retaining their staff might go to having more contractors with temporary PRN positions because they aren't able to otherwise fill their staff. So that is a good red flag. That's also been my experience.
It's also a lot easier to fire a contractor than it is an employee.
So it sounds like there's good flexibility, but maybe not as much cushion or there's not like that net to catch you if something were to happen.
No, but, a lot of people like to fly without a parachute, right? I get on planes all the time and I don't have a parachute. But I think there's just pros and cons just to kind of recap things on this side of the coin. Is 1099, you're going to get to write off your expenses. You're not going to be able to do that as a W-2. When it comes to health insurance, you actually have more options as a contractor because you're buying your own policy. Whereas with a W-2 employee, you're just going into whatever plan the employer has. Now, it does usually cost more, and hopefully you can work that out with an hourly rate or some type of, fixed price contract. You have flexibility with the retirement plans as a 1099 contractor if you're able to afford to do one. Whereas with an employer, it's whatever they got, that's what it is. But if you can't afford to do it over here, at least something as an employee is better. And last but not least, we spoke about the unemployment. So that's an option if you really want that type of parachute or security net, as you called it. So just recapping, those are the pros and cons that I see for these types of individuals.
Well, that has been really informative, and I wish my previous self would have known that when I was evaluating different job opportunities in my past. Is there anything else related to 1099 and W-2s you wanted to talk about before we close today?
I think we've kind of buttoned it up. If there's any other further questions that any of your listeners may have, I'll provide my contact information and happy to work with them.
So if people want to learn more about taxes for occupational therapy professionals or connect with your services, what would be the best way to reach you? And I can put your information in the show notes, but if there's anything you want to share.
Sure. If they're looking to reach out for income tax services, they can reach out to info, I-N-F-O, at I like ice cream, A like apple, .T-A-X. info@ia.tax. We'll get your information. We'll see if we're a good fit for each other. Thank
you so much, Matthew, for sharing your expertise and insights with us today. To our listeners, I hope this conversation has given you some valuable perspectives on financial implications of employment decisions. That's all for this episode of the Health Coach OT, evidence-based coaching tips and resources for managing chronic disease. Thank you for listening. If you found today's discussion valuable, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts and leave us a review. For free resources, visit healthcoachot.com and join our newsletter for weekly insights and updates. Until next time.